corollary or ancillary seismographs that are absolutely hooked up to satellites, etc., they would pick that up. So I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I have seen no evidence it's happening. Yet I look at the ones in the South Pacific, a 7.1 and a 6.8, in a matter of hours separated from each other. Now we're getting some major movements. Again, when I look at the sun and see just what the sun is doing in its activity and its coronal mass ejections and its continual super hot phase that by all scientific explanations was to have been gone, last year or so, and it just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter, then people are absolutely becoming more, I'd say this, convinced that there's something else in the equation causing global warming to take place than, again, just the sheer activity of humans. It's an amazing thing. Humans tend to elevate themselves above God, failing to acknowledge God, yet if they elevate themselves into his position, why shouldn't they have better answers? That's all I want to say. My statement is simple. I know God, and the scientists aren't him. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got someone who's in Arizona, northern Arizona, talking about the groundwater. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was probably 60 days ago. We had received some information from a lady in New Mexico, same type situation taking place. Let me tell you this, before, and again, for the supervolcano, you've got to understand Yellowstone has about 60% of the world's geologic features in it. The amount of steam venting that takes place is amazing. Before you would see the end of the world as you know it due to a supervolcano, you'd have to see some pretty traumatic precursor events. The smartest scientists now, who are given credit for being able to predict earthquakes, say there are not enough long-period earthquakes to cause them alarm at this point. But these aren't guys that work for the company store. I know renegade geologists. I know renegade volcanologists. Renegade meaning these guys don't have to worry whether their papers get published to feed their family. I also know some guys that I don't know if you could find a mouse hole small enough for them to crawl in who won't commit themselves to anything. But again, the point that I'm trying to make tonight is simply this. We have got real issues on this immediate horizon. We've got the suitcase nuke story. We've got earthquakes, but Yellowstone is not ready to blow. Well, I'm going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back after the first 3 minutes, and I'll give you more to chew on. You're listening to Q-Files. Stay tuned. Now, here's a good email. This will probably take the whole rest of the afternoon to answer, but I think I must not be communicating because I think I've answered part of this, but maybe not. Steve, I keep hearing all these different reports. This is from Larry. On the Alex Jones show, I'm hearing that Osama bin Laden died a year ago and is being kept on ice for the right moment for the Bush administration to gain some re-election points. Then I hear on your show that there are plans that Osama will be caught. I'm quoting Larry, and for everyone's sake, that was Arlen Specter's statement. And it was not only Arlen Specter's statement, but it's everybody's statement behind the scenes. Some say that he is totally alive, others say he's dead. All I'm doing is quoting my source. Now listen to this. I understand that Osama and Al-Qaeda are likely CIA black ops names, of course. I don't trust any part of our government, especially when we have FBI and CIA agents down at the southern border that are prosecuting Americans for fighting off the Mexican army that keeps coming over and exchanging gunfire with border area ranchers. All the news that Doug reports about these fundamentalist websites with threats sounds more like even more disinformation from the shadow government. It's like, looky here, the big bad Muslim fundies are going to bomb you. Give us your liberties so we can save you. It's all about manufacturing terror, so we will react to it in asking the very same government to come protect us with their fake-ass solutions. Larry, okay, I want to answer this one. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't agree more with Larry than it's all about manufacturing terror. If you understand that during the Soviet Union, before the Soviet Union broke up, we were in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen, giving them everything from Stinger missiles to building them underground bunkers and bases, and they were our boys. The international terror and the international gun and heroin trafficking network are like Siamese twins. You cannot separate the drug trade from the weapons trade. almost interchangeable. One could be your coinage in your pocket, the other would be the currency in your wallet. But guess what? Guns and narcotics, in the sense, I'm not talking about guns like Americans own, I'm talking about weaponry, sophisticated military weaponry, is traded on the black markets as easily as you would trade anything you would have to trade. If you're a painter, your paintings. If you're a bricklayer, your labors. If you're a mechanic, your ability to fix vehicles for cash. These guys were the ones, and I'm talking about, that have pretty much set up the Mujahideen. Now, it's no one's, how would I say this, no one's blindness to the fact that these guys who want World War III are setting the world up for a false messiah. It should be no one's misunderstanding or mistaken conceptualization of end-time events that this stuff just goes on and on and on forever, and it's just, wear us out. Even though in the book of Daniel it talks about the Antichrist and talks about wearing out of the saints. Now, listen, everyone. The fact that we are seeing Americans prosecuted for defending their own land in fighting off drug dealers and illegal immigrants and good Arab spies and everything else tells me that there is a group, a faction. Let's call them Faction 1, 2, and 3. Faction 1 is absolutely intent on destroying the United States as quickly as possible with the maximum amount of deaths. Faction number 2, and this is a little simplistic, and I can't explain every faction in its entirety, but suffice it to say, faction number 2 wants to generate a civil war in which they can get pretty much everybody, the whites against the Hispanics and the blacks and vice versa, and then finally the blacks against the Hispanics so that everybody kills each other off. Now, this is in their open plans, everyone. Listen, let me give you the scariest statement I know that came out of Brent Scowcroft. He said, by consent or by conquest, we will have a new world order. And I think it was Schlesinger, the former defense secretary, that made the statement that the new world order cannot come about with the exception of much shed blood. That's kind of like going to the cattle, the slaughterhouse where the cattle are slaughtered and telling them to relax, enjoy the pen. They see beyond the pen, and I hope you see beyond the pen you're in too. So when Larry says it's all about manufacturing terror, I could say this, Larry, amen. I couldn't agree with you more. So we will react to in asking the very same government to come protect us as with their fake-ass solutions. I got to tell you, I saw the TSA in operation, in Los Angeles, in Bozeman, Montana, in Salt Lake. And while there maybe are some competent people, all I saw was the most incompetent group of people I have ever visualized. One guy who could not speak English kept asking everybody, backing up the line in L.A., if they had any Lala Computer. Okay, do you know what that is? Do you have a Lala Computer? Well, that turned out to be a laptop computer. By the way, I think he was from, someplace other than this planet, but that's neither here nor there. Then they had people that were tripping over themselves, and they were checking. Amazing. This is amazing. They had a little girl and her tennis shoe, and they're wiping it down to make sure there was no plastic explosives. And meanwhile, let's just say this, some of the boys that didn't look like they just graduated from the church choir were going through just uninspected, unaffected. Some of the people were so busy reading their books that they didn't watch what was going on. So, ladies and gentlemen, I agree. This whole terror situation is manufactured, but it doesn't mean it's not real in that the desire is to destroy the United States. The intent is to absolutely throw us into a third world nation by the powers that be and to destroy all and everyone that would stand in their way. The best way they feel they can do that is to initiate class warfare. Blacks against whites, blacks against Hispanics, Hispanics against blacks, Hispanics against whites. In other words, a total civil war. And you've got to understand who's doing it. It is not the people you think it is, and even though the people you think it is are out there in the open and they've got their obvious ties to the skull and bones or whatever they have, look, the point is that the real power of this world is behind the scenes. So do I know if Osama bin Laden is dead at this point? I do not know that he's dead at this point, but I know this. If he is in captivity or dead, either one of those things, I agree, he's being kept on ice for the maximum political exposure, and that's what Arlen Specter stated. And I think I read that that quote on my show last Wednesday, a week ago Wednesday. So Larry, have got to tell you point blank that it is all about manufacturing terror. It's a Hegelian dialectic, and we're screwed. We are totally screwed, because people aren't smart enough to see their very future and their children's future and their grandchildren's future being blotted out of the way by the New World Order crew. And it's just fascinating to me. Listen to this. This is from Murray. He said, Steve, I just received word in the place I work that the price of stainless steel is expected to go up 25% in a month, and to place our orders for our projects as soon as possible. In addition, another bulletin came out that the price of ordinary steel was expected to rise significantly due to the overwhelming demand in China. If commodity prices are going to start up like this, even if no major terror events occur, the economic fallout of inflation forcing up interest rates, destroying the bond, plus a housing market will place us into depression. Please comment. Well, I got to tell you something. If steel is going up, and toke, the steel slag, went from $3 a ton to $280 a ton in the last 6 months. And Murray's question is a great one. If the commodities start going like this, even with no major terrorist event, then we're, ladies and gentlemen, we're being set up, in my opinion and his opinion, for basically the biggest depression. And by the way, when you start looking at our financial charts against the 1929 through 33 period, you're going to find out that the current administration is pretty much adopting a very similar plan to FDR. And Murray and everyone, if stainless steel is going up, what do you think that's going to do to go to silver and gold, and not only the precious metals, but the strategic metals? So it's going to be important for all of you guys to keep watching this. By the way, today, and I'm sorry, I forget to do this. I get asked to do this every night, and every night I forget. But tonight, the metals prices are acting extremely unusual. I'm looking at the chart right now on the A-Mark, and it's showing 646 on silver, and it's showing 407.50. Now, what's interesting on silver is on Friday, in light of all the talk that came out, silver closed really strong, even though it was down from the high of the day. Palladium right now is 242.50, platinum is 835, and gold is 407.50. And I got to tell you something. I believe that the euro does affect the price of gold, but at some point, that's going to change. Robert, tell me what the gold stocks did today, if you would, please. I don't have the time to go look because I'm playing catch up with my email. And Robert's the guy that emails me on the gold stocks. Let's see this. Did I get this yet? Nope. Let's see this. Let me see. Didn't get that either. I'm sorry. You know, as I say, I try and watch these things, and it's just so many. Arian Gyra. That's where it still keeps popping up, and that's kind of a fascinating. Will be a fascinating series of events to watch and series of shakes to keep in touch on. But again, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important that we settle on and focus on what the real threats are. And I got to tell you something, it does not at this point, and I live 90 miles, not even 90, 70 miles north of the border in West Yellowstone, and I can tell you, I have friends down there I've known for 30 years, and they're not picking it up, ladies and gentlemen. They're not picking it up, and it's really important. Now, here's another story that Bill in New Jersey sent me. Thank you, Bill, for reminding me. He said, Steve, I sent you the local newspaper article about security company in New Jersey guarding all the vital sites. The company used convicts and obtained contracts with bribe. No background checks were run on their employees. And what Bill is talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is it is absolutely absurd to put the fox in charge of the hen house, and so many of the security people don't get checked. And then what they've done now, they're putting the ones that don't have security checks on at night. Do you follow me? They put the good ones on during the day for show, but they put the bad ones on at night, and it just gets to you, how do I say this? It gets to you, it gives you the feeling that, boy, there's a lot that these people just don't get, and they just don't get it by any means. It's beyond me sometimes, and it becomes more, what is it? Someone said that if ever there was a death wish, and by the way, it's not a Charles Bronson movie. It seems like the standard operating procedure in America right now, because we deny everything, and we just come to the standpoint now where it's in our face. So, do I believe that the terrorist threat is real? Absolutely. Do I believe it's totally fabricated? Absolutely. By fabricated, I mean, look, you can, if you control the purse strings, you can go out and build an internal army in this country that will dance to whatever beat you want it to dance to. So again, I want to encourage you guys, as you listen to the show and others, that you just keep starting to keep track of where the news stories are headed. And as you watch where the news stories are headed, it becomes more and more apparent, at least to me every day, that the mainstream, all they care about is the agenda. Good name for a book, The Agenda. There's probably been 15,000 books, but it still talks about it, or right in front of our faces. Patricia Doyle has sent me an email, and she's very, very much concerned again about the SARS. Now, isn't it interesting that the mortality rate seems to continue to climb as and more people become exposed to this stuff? And see, this is why I wrote about the dead scientists. I wrote about the dead scientists primarily and for the purpose of letting people know that when you see a group of men who are dying that are in a very, I'd say, small field and a very select field and a very, how do I say this, very close field or close-knit. I mean, they have peer reviews and these are the who's who of microbiologists. Then you got to say this: who has the most to gain? By killing those guys. And the people that ride my case about, well, they're not all dead, they're just dropping because they're 50 years old and it was their time to go. Again, when you deal with statistics, you have to have a population that's worth starting to draw your statistical analysis and produce your conclusions, your mathematical probabilities and chance based on that population. And when you start to see how small a population the microbiologists truly are, in effect, and you start then, let's say you take the cream of the crop by their own peers' appraisal, and you put that creme de la creme on the top of your chart, and then you'll find out that the statistical analysis of those guys being killed that close together or even dying in that short period of time, you can take national mortality rates for their ages, you can take professions, and let me just tell you this. Let's face it, microbiologists before this time weren't like NASCAR drivers who get killed or the most, dangerous jobs in the world, whatever those are. I mean, these guys were guys that sit in their desks, look at stuff under microscopes, electron microscopes, and do all their DNA detailing on blackboards or now on computers, and yet the ability of all those guys to die in such a short period of time, and then you take some of the most outlandish explanations that people have put forth on them, it becomes pretty disconcerting. So again, I want you to know that it's getting to the point now where we're seeing too many unusual ties that are starting to develop and that are basically saying to us, wake up everyone, we're going to see some really nasty biological ravaging of the planet. And it goes on and on and on to become even more formidable and forbidding. Now, let me just remind you of this. The 1918 flu virus killed 20 million people around the world, and it was deadly because of the unique avian influenza-like protein. Now, this is according to U.S. and British scientists who reported it on Express Online, which is a scientific publication, on the 5th of February, 2004. Now, that's not an old article. It states that, like the current outbreak of avian influenza in East Asia, the 1980 pandemic influenza virus appears to have jumped from birds to people with little change. Gee, how did that happen? But unlike the 1918 influenza virus, the current avian influenza virus, which has killed 16 people so far, has not yet developed the mutation that allowed influenza virus to decimate human population 80 years ago. But and then, this is me, not this article, but you can bet they're sure trying. 2 teams of researchers have analyzed samples of the virus from the 1918 outbreak, and has said it bears the clear hallmarks of a bird virus that mutated very little before jumping from birds to people. Health officials in China, Thailand, and Vietnam are scrambling to control the current outbreak of avian influenza H5N1 virus. It's lethal to people, which is often the case when viruses leap from one species to another. In 1997, when it first appeared in Hong Kong, it was contained very quickly because it did not spread from human to human, but only from birds to people. So far this year, only 16 people have been killed, but there is some evidence that it may have begun spreading from person to person. If that happens, experts fear that the virus has the potential to be as bad as the 1918 epidemic. My answer to all this is, you can bet your bottom microbe that these guys will make sure that it is more virulent than the 19 epidemic. Again, I've quoted you the different quotes from the different people who are famous, some alive, some dead, but they think the planet can only support 500 million people. 5.5 billion people must be purged, culled. The useless eaters must be basically sent to a higher plane of existence. That's just a nice way of saying murdered. And so you've got this egalitarian group that's out there. And by the way, I'm not going to, and I said I wouldn't do this, but some people, when I say the old world order, they get all bent out of shape and say, well, now, you really mean the New World Order. So let me just say this. The New World Order and the Old World Order have always been controlled by Satan. And the deal is that it is now the time for him to put his plan into full-scale effect. When I was coming to my office today, I saw a story that my wife had called up on her computer at home that was talking about Dr. Dobson is challenging the Christians to stand up, and I don't have it, or I'll read it. I'll do that tomorrow. And recognize that, do you know there are actually bills, and these are real. This isn't no nonsense kind of stuff, no news nonsense kind of stuff. That's what I meant to say. That there is evidence that there's already bills proposed, and they're waiting to see how the Christians react, that it will be illegal for Christian television or radio to broadcast the scriptures or to have any evangelical show on. Now, you say that could never happen. I guarantee you, you never thought it would happen to be happening. What's now present as you travel in the Gulag Americapelago. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gulag Americapelago. And the Gulag, obviously, were the Russian prisons. And so now what we're coming to is we're coming to a point where you can't even call it Fortress America, because we are absolutely allowing the total invasion of this country by not only illegal immigrants, and by the way, I'm not saying they're all Hispanic or Mexican in origin. I'm just telling you that the powers that be will punish anyone that interferes with their plans. So these guys these brave men and women who are in Arizona and Texas and California and New Mexico that are trying to protect their property, they'll bring in the big boys and big guns. And when you see Mexican Humvees with Ma Deuces, 50 caliber M2 heavy belt-fed machine guns on them, and you see these poor, and I say these poor ranchers, I got news for you. The conquest has begun, and that's the Reconquista movement of the U.S., and it's not by who you think it's by. Again, it is a plan. It has been the plan to stir up the goodies. That's my definition for what the Russians plan to do and the Chinese plan to do in both Canada and Mexico. If you've understood Canada and Mexico's positioning and posturing over the last several years, you can understand where the unseen hand is in their lives. It's kind of interesting. Okay, thanks so much, Robert. He said, Steve, I had a good day with gold stocks today. He said I made about $1,400. Biggest winner was CDE, Coeur d'Alene, which was up 6%. That's in one day. Clifton Mining, a silver stock recommended by Bob Chapman, was up 11.1%. And, we're seeing silver up sometimes in the neighborhood of 6 and 7%. If silver goes up 40 cents in a day, that's 7%. So we're seeing some moves now, ladies and gentlemen, so the activity is there. Well, I'm out of time, and thank you for bearing with me my first day back. By the way, if you want to click on Stephanie's website, go get her CD. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and I plan to put up her concert, or actually it's called a showcase. That'll be up as soon as I can, and we will have it together for your benefit sometime hopefully this week. Well, good night, everyone. God bless you, and it's good to be back. Again, thank you to David Langford and Doug Hagman for filling in for me at the end of last week. Bye-bye.